Senator Marco Rubio just confronted pro-Hamas sympathizers in Congress and delivered one of the boldest pro-Israel speeches yet. First, he clashes with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal over revoking a pro-Hamas student's visa. Then, he issues a powerful warning to the world. Watch till the end and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Representative Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. On March 21st, 2025, the State Department approved the revocation of a student visa for Rumeysa Öztürk, a Turkish citizen who is a graduate student at Tufts University, apparently simply for writing an op-ed. According to an internal State Department memo, you took this action under your discretionary authority to revoke visas, and soon after you revoked her visa, armed and masked plainclothes officers snatched Ms. Öztürk off the street and transported her to a prison in Louisiana. Mr. Secretary, do you really think that Ms. Öztürk's op-ed results in a foreign policy consequence for the United States?
I believe that case involves someone whose visa we never would have granted had we known ahead of time.
I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you if you think an op-ed, if an op-ed, which, but that's exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Öztürk's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities that were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Öztürk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you, in the meanwhile, I have the authority, I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says, and that means that you are trumping the legal Supreme Court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country
Rubio,
apart.
I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job. Who snatches her off the street?
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked? Is that
that law student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed.
Well,
she wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
Reclaiming my time, you revoked her student visa because she
proudly.
wrote an op-ed.
Would you revoke? We're going to do more.
I have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that, quote, Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest who's here to stir up trouble.
Are you going to revoke the visa of somebody who made that?
I mean, the case. I'll look at it. I'm looking to get crazy people
actually, it's not just about revoking. You actually, Secretary Rubio, excuse me, reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You who granted that person to enter the United States. That's a totally different process.
That's someone that applied here through a totally different process. Student visas are a privilege.
Secretary Rubio,
deny them all the time and we'll revoke
revoked a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for masked men to snatch somebody off the street.
Your time is expired.
That's your claim. That's not accurate.
Recognized ranking.
Golda Meir once said, "It took Moses 40 years to find the only place in the Middle East with no oil. But Israel's wealth lay not under the ground, but in its people, the Jewish people, exiles, pilgrims, and dreamers from around the world who made the desert bloom into a high-tech superpower." Israel accomplished this miracle not by abandoning its history and identity, but by embracing them. Sadly, some of Israel's neighbors have failed to appreciate how following Israel's example could have brought prosperity to the region. Instead, they chose war. They decided to impoverish their people in a futile effort to destroy Israel. They succeeded in the former, while failing in the latter. Anti-Semitism is the world's oldest bigotry, and given that we are all here today, it is also the world's most futile. Egyptian pharaohs, Roman emperors, Persian shahs, and Middle Eastern despots have sought to destroy the nation of Israel. Adolf Hitler dreamed of a world without Jews, an idea he shares with Hamas. Today, these regimes and empires have crumbled into dust, but Israel stands, and the Jewish people prosper. I pray for the day when the entire world will recognize the futility of anti-Semitism, when leaders will abandon self-destructive hatred and forge a new future in partnership with Israel by building on the Abraham Accords. Under President Trump's leadership, there are signs that the future may be closer than we dared dream. But only if we can overcome the futile, persistent evil of anti-Semitism can we reach that future. Earlier this year, I stood beside Foreign Minister Saar at the Yad Vashem Memorial. I remembered the millions of Jews who were slaughtered and reflected on the meaning of the words, "never again." The importance of those words were brought home to every American last week when Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram were murdered in cold blood outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum here in Washington, D.C. Yaron was a Christian born in Germany who came to love the Jewish state. Sarah was from Kansas and loved Yaron. They dreamed of marrying in Jerusalem, and instead, they were cut down in cold blood by a monster who did not care about Yaron's faith or Sarah's background. We should never forget that as he was being arrested after killing 2 innocents who he believed were Jews, the murderer proudly screamed, "Free, free Palestine." Words that now serve as a battle cry for the death of Jews, the destruction of Israel, and the horrors we must never again allow. There can be no compromise with anti-Semitism. There can be no nuanced separation of hatred of Israel and hatred of the Jewish people. Those who called to boycott Israel are calling for the boycott of their Jewish neighbors and classmates. Those who call for violence against Israelis are calling for violence against Jews. Those who call for the destruction of Israel are calling for the destruction of the Jewish people. That is why, as we extend our prayers to Yaron and Sarah's loved ones, we must stand in solidarity with Israel. There can be no coexistence with evil. There can be no nuance to hatred. Under President Trump, the United States will stand with the Jewish people. We have implemented a vigorous new visa policy that will prevent foreign nationals from coming to the United States to foment hatred against our Jewish community. We are holding international organizations and nations accountable for rhetoric against Israel that resurfaces in the manifesto of monsters, like Yaron and Sarah's killer. But we do see an eventual light at the end of this long tunnel of suffering. One can imagine a Middle East in which the Abraham Accords eventually reign. So thank you for the opportunity to address you.